Hello, hello, testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Hey everybody, we're going to be beginning here in about 3 minutes or so. Glad to have everyone here so far. This is just a sound check. Hey, let's see if we can turn off. There we go. Here I am, everybody. Will Crane. We're going to be starting here in about 3 minutes. I'm very excited. Glad to have you all here. Those of you who are watching again, we'll be starting in just a few minutes. Hey everybody, we're going to be beginning here in about 3 minutes or so. Glad to have everyone here so far. This is just a sound check. There we go. Here I am, everybody. Will Crane. We're going to be starting here in about 3 minutes. Very exciting. Glad to have just a few minutes. Everybody, we're getting closer and closer to beginning. We've got people still trickling in. This is awesome. This is going to be great. This whole hour, we're going to be talking about how you can prepare for the National Physical Therapy exam. Some of the things that I've learned in 2 years of helping folks, and it's going to be awesome. I want you all to notice the question and answer. And sometimes if you look, well, it depends on what screen you're in, but there's a little box that says Q&A. In that box, that's where you're going to be able to type in any questions you may have. And with those questions, I'll try to get to as many as I can. It also kind of works as a chat feature if you do have something to say. But in essence, what we're going to be doing is just going through. I've got some material already prepared, and then I want to answer questions that we can help everybody. So here we go. I'll turn this off. Okay, everybody, we're going to officially begin. My name is Will Crane. I'm a physical therapist. I have been practicing for 3 years. I graduated from the University of Utah about 3 years ago. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself. So excited to have you all here. This is awesome. There were over 200 of you who had some interest in this discussion about the NPTE, and I want you to know that this is just a candid discussion. It's just me and you, and we're going to be, really going through as much material as we can over the next little bit. And yeah, it's going to be exciting. So what I've got, I did prepare a PowerPoint presentation. I know PowerPoints are super boring, but for the most part, it's really what's going to help me help you the best, so we can go through things in an organized fashion. And this is going to be probably the most effective way that we're going to do this. So here we go. PT final exam. So again, this is something that I began, you'll be able to see my mouse here. I began a couple years ago. Well, let me tell you first of all more about what the plan is. Today we're going to talk about the NPTE and what the format of the exam is going to be, as well as the content that's covered on the exam. And then we're going to go through and talk about different ways of studying for the exam, the different materials that are required. And then maybe my favorite part is we're going to talk about how to pass the NPTE and how to fail the NPTE. Now, I recognize that many of you that have joined in here and are watching are at different stages of life. You're at different, different education levels. Maybe you're in your first year, maybe you're in your third year, or maybe you've been out of practice for 5 or 10 years and you're just trying to dive back into it. And I hope that we'll be able to answer some questions that are, along the basic lines about what exactly is the test, and then answer maybe some more advanced questions about how you can prepare and what you need to do. And then I've got some final thoughts and a pretty cool offer that I've been working on, and then we'll take your questions. That's the plan here. So again, just a little bit about me. I graduated in 2011 from number 15 ranked University of Utah. Now I know number 15 is not super awesome, but at least it's not 115. Great school. Really enjoyed that. And now I practice in a place in southeastern Idaho where I get to do a little bit of everything. I've got outpatient, orthopedic, geriatric, pediatric, sports, inpatient, long. I mean, I really see it all. That's something that I've really enjoyed about working rural, is that I'm able to do pretty much every aspect of physical therapy that's available. And in 2012, so about a year and a half after I graduated and took the exam, as I was pondering, I kept getting questions from former classmates, from people who were in a class or two younger than me, wondering exactly how to, what was the best way to study for the NPT, or what was out there. And honestly, I recognized that there was a need for more information. There was a need for someone to really do kind of what we do as physical therapists, to coach people through, to tell you what's on the test, what's going on. And that's really what I'm all about, is trying to help as many people as I can so they understand what in the world is on the NPTE and how they can be successful. And there I've got a picture of my family there. That's the most recent picture I've got. 3 kids, beautiful wife. Just a lot of fun. I really enjoy where I practice and what I do. So let's talk just a little bit about the National Physical Therapy Exam. It is administered by the FSBPT, and that's the Federation of the State Boards of Physical Therapy. And that started, I can't remember the exact year, but it's been a decade or two that the APTA used to do all of the administration of the NPTE, but there was a conflict of interest there where the APTA was the professional body. Anyway, it just worked out better to create this separate entity called the Federation of the State Boards of Physical Therapy. And with the creation of that came the creation of this third party that was able to, from a more removed standpoint, talk about or create the exam, administer the exam, and do all the things that are required for an exam of this scope. Now, in order to sit for the National Physical Therapy exam, there's really a couple things you have to remember. Is that so each state has their very own criteria for sitting for the exam, and most of the time the criteria are pretty simple. Is basically that you have to meet the basic requirements. You have to have graduated from a university, or in the United States you have to graduate from a CAPTE accredited institution, or if you're foreign trained, you have to submit your credentials to the state so they can be reviewed by your state licensing board. And then after that, you have to get authorized by your state in order to take your test. Now, this is the key thing that I think a lot of people forget, is that some states limit the number of attempts that a student can try the NPTE, and that's something that for many states there is no limit, but I can think of a couple examples of folks who have had troubles after taking the exam 3 times. Many states require remediation, but there are a couple of states that say 3 times and that's it, no more. And so that's something that you need to review, and that is published on the FSBPT website or at your state licensing board. And so, as you know, as we're talking about this test, I want you to keep in mind that there's a lot of steps in order to get to actually sit for the exam, and sometimes it's a little bit confusing, but it's important to start early when you start preparing to sit for the exam. Now, those of you who are taking the exam next week or taking the exam in October, you are very close to that time. But those of you who are taking the exam, say, next year, or maybe you're in your second year of physical therapy school, you've got a little bit of time, but make sure you get all of everything completed in the at the appropriate time frame. That's the bottom line. So the NPTE, the whole format of the thing is, it's obviously computer-based and multiple choice, meaning that there are 4 options. The nice part is, and this was just lovely when I was taking the exam, this is lovely, and the bottom line is that there are no all of the above or none of the above choices. Each of the section, so it's 250 questions. Each the test is divided into 5 separate sections, so 50 questions per section. You are allowed to take 1 scheduled break after section 2. So what does that mean? That means that the clock stops, so you can take a 15-minute break between section 2 and section 3. Those of you who have taken the exam before and are tuning in trying to pass it, that's something that you're already well aware of. But then you are allowed to take breaks between the other sections of the test. However, those are breaks where the clock does not stop, and that's important to remember, that you just have the one single break. Of the 250 questions, only 200 of them are scored items. And so what that means is that 50 of the questions on the test are what are considered pre-test items, or questions that are not going to be counted against your score. And that's, I tell you that just by way of information. There's really no way you're able to discern or distinguish from one from the other. Basically, in each section, there are 50 questions. Of each section, 40 of them are graded and 10 of them are not. So again, there's no way of telling. There's no way to even, you can't tell. You shouldn't even try to guess it. But that's how you get the 600 out of 800 score, is based on those 200 scored items. And you must score at least a 600 on their scale scoring system. Now, the FSBPT is very secretive about their specific scoring model. They do publish some material about it, saying that it is slightly curved, meaning that it's more sensitive to students who are right around the 600 mark. But on the converse side, it means that a person can get an 800 score without answering every question correctly. Again, I tell you all this just so you know what in the world's going on with the test, but really you should be striving to get well above the 75, because if you try to get right on the mark, I mean, I've had students before who have missed it. They've calculated by, just simply by a couple of questions, and that's really, really discouraging. Anyway, so there you go. That's the format of the NPTE. So computer-based, 5 sections, 600 out of 800 is the important number. All right, so well, I guess I want to tell you about maybe one of the most important documents that you're going to read going into the NPTE, and that is that FSBPT publishes a content outline. Now, this content outline, yes, it is very vague, and yes, it's very broad, but it describes in relative detail the sections and the information that is going to be tested on the exam. And so that's something, I put the link there in the PowerPoint. And I'll make this available on the website afterwards too, just so you know. So you don't have to take notes if you don't want to, or you can search the FSBPT. This is in their candidate handbook. They have that content outline. In conjunction with that, this is where I created a study outline. This is something that I created that kind of fleshes out all of that content that's described on the FSBPT content outline. That's something that, is really useful for a lot of students. It really spells out, what conditions are going to be on the test. It really spells out what you need to do to study for it all. And I do want to point out also that on the content outline, it publishes how many questions approximately in each section will be tested. And so if you look at the numbers, musculoskeletal and neuromuscular make up well over 50% of the exam. So remember that if you're studying stuff, you'll notice there are only 4 questions on research-based items, research and understanding literature. But if you look at musculoskeletal and neuromuscular, I mean, we're talking well over 100 questions that are just on musculoskeletal and neuromuscular. Now, again, this should be useful information to you as you're going through all of the material, knowing that musculoskeletal is the key. It's absolutely the key. And then neuromuscular close behind it, cardiopulmonary right behind that. Those are the 3 big ones for sure. All right, let's see, as we're moving along. All right, so this is where I want to talk a little bit about how to study. There are a number of you who have asked me, what is the best thing? What books are required? What do I need to do? And so the nice part is that on my website, ptfinalexam.com, you'll find in the upper portion of the screen, there's a menu called Resources. And I just want to point that out to you because that's where all of these resources are listed for you, side-by-side comparison, just so you know which obviously which resources are available. I'll tell you that when I was studying, I used the Score Builders book. I thought it was great, very visual, lots of pictures, colors. I found it great. I've also used the Therapy Ed book by O'Sullivan, and that O'Sullivan book is really quite exhaustive in its information. The hard part is, though, that maybe it's a little more difficult to read. Both of them, though, are excellent things. The therapy exam prep folks, there's a website dedicated to forums about getting students together who have the same common goal of getting ready for the NPTE. The important part about that is to realize that it is mostly forum-based. There are some videos, but bottom line is that you're working together as a group, and you'll need some of these materials as well to dive into that. And then my favorite, this is one that I started a couple years ago called PT Final Exam. And this is something that I've been working very hard on. I'm very proud of. It's something that is meant to do what we do as physical therapists. Our job is not to do the exercise for folks, but rather to train them what they need to do in order to get better. We can help diagnose problems. We can help them on pretty much everything except the actual doing. That's, except for maybe a little bit of manual therapy. Most of the time we instruct them, a lot of home exercise program. It's really cool. And I've got, bear with me here for just a second. I want to invite a student of mine that I had a couple times ago. Her story is really unique. Let me see if I can get her in here. Again, bear with me for just a second. The internet can be kind of a cruel mistress at times, and it's yeah. Hold on one second. Brief intermission. Great time to get up, go to the bathroom, get a drink. This is, everybody just pause. Well, I guess, it looks like I said, internet's a cruel mistress. We'll try again here in a little bit, but anyway, oh, look, hold on one second. Just hang on. You can tell this is live. This is, it's always very exciting. I appreciate your patience. Yeah, it looks like, oh dear. Cruel Mistress is not going to work this time. I've got to tell you about this student, though. This is maybe one of the most awesome students I've ever worked with. Her name is Hallie. She is so cool. She took the exam 10 times. Now, imagine that. There are some of you who have taken the exam once, maybe taken the exam twice. Taking the exam 10 different times and did not pass. Now, consider how you would feel if you were at that point. She graduated a couple years ago and was working very hard towards, this was her dream. This was her goal, was to practice physical therapy. Anyway, when it came down to it, she tried every single system out there. It was just really, really challenging for her to find anything that was really working for her. And anyway, that was when I started interacting with her, and that was well. So we started a couple months ago, and we really worked together on the content outline that was on the exam, and that's something that I felt was very important, and I still do feel like is one of the most important things you can do on the exam, is to have a plan and to understand what content it is that you're missing. And so that was something that I worked with her specifically with, and I really hope that we can still get her in here. We may still be able to, but in any case, the bottom line was that on her 11th attempt, after trying everything else, she was able to pass. This is an articulate, very smart individual who finally was able to pass on her 11th attempt. She had the stick-to-itiveness to keep going and do the hard things that are required to pass the exam. And so I'll talk a little bit about how I recommend people study for the exam. And this is, this is really the cool part, is that if you don't have a plan, it's going to be much, much harder for you. And this is something that I feel like so many students struggle with, that there's just no really awesome plan. The number one mistake is that they do not have a written plan. And so the first thing you must do when you're starting to study for the NPTE is that you've got to have a list of your top 10 weaknesses. Now, I want you to be as specific as possible when you list these top 10 weaknesses. The key with this is being able to understand where it is and what's difficult for you, so that then you can attack it with a vengeance, absolutely with a vengeance. Then the next thing you need to do is you have to organize your time. You need to devote a specific amount of time each day to studying the material. And this is, again, key. Once you have a plan in place, recognizing your weaknesses, you've got the content outline in front of you, that's when you can start organizing your time and devoting the appropriate amount of time each day to study the material. Then the third thing, and this is the part where I really feel like the PT Final Exam program has really come together, is that you've got the strength of having a study partner and an accountability partner, one in me and in the other students. It's something where we can all work together for a common goal. And when you report your progress and you're accountable for what you do, that's when you know you'll succeed. And so that's why I always recommend that people join a class just for that group support. Now, you don't have to join a class. There are certainly, certainly instances where you like studying alone, you like doing it all. That's totally fine. I really recommend that you join a class just because it can really help you feel accountable for everything that you're doing. Now, of the different ones that are available, there's, like I said, there's the therapy exam prep that's got a 3-month form and a video-based program. There's the therapy team folks. They've got a 9-day class, about $1,000. And then, again, just putting in a plug for my mastermind study group, this is something where it goes for 6 weeks. We gather together on, each Saturday morning, we gather together and talk about specific questions. We talk about ways to answer questions on the NPT. We talk about, lots of practice questions. We try to spend a lot of time on those practice questions. And then in the meantime, between each session on Saturdays, you're given a specific assignment to complete. Now, when you complete those assignments, I admit, when you look at it, you're going to say to yourself, holy cow, this is crazy. I could never finish this in 1 week. But what it does is it helps you focus your time, helps you get things done on time, and then more or less you report back to me on how things went. And that's what those interactive webinars are for, where we come together, we discuss questions, we really put things together for you. And then something that's also a huge benefit is that I give lots and lots of personal attention. As many of I've got a couple of my students in the class here listening to us right now. Most of you know that I am blisteringly fast at replying to emails. It's almost uncanny, maybe a little bit freaky, but I answer emails just as quickly as I can, and then we can also talk about, or we can also schedule and put together phone or Skype chats that are really, really awesome for being able to, really put things together on an individual level. And that's something that I really enjoy doing, is interacting with folks one-on-one. So really the bottom line is that you have to know everything. I mean, when it comes to taking the exam, you've got to take, you really definitely should be taking 4 practice exams, at least 4 practice exams. This is, again, a common mistake I'll talk about a little bit later, but practice exams in a test environment. Now, what does this mean? This means that when you are taking the test, the practice test, I'm talking practice tests here, spend time as if you were on the real exam rather than, and this is, again, a mistake that many people make, is that, so you read a question, you kind of half commit to an answer, and then you go and look up the answer in the back of the book. And then you do that again on the next one, you kind of half commit, and you're like, oh yeah, I kind of knew that one, I pretty much knew that one. When really you didn't have to commit and you didn't have to really critically think about it. And so this is where I think it's so important to take a practice exam in a test environment. And then as a part of this, I've heard a lot of recommendations about the PETs. In fact, I've heard of a couple of schools who even say, don't take the PETs. The PETs the worst thing you could do. They're old questions. You never could, it's not going to help. Really, truly, those PET exams, they are former test questions. Now, some people say, well, maybe it's a detriment that they are the former test questions, but I say, these test questions are maybe 18 months old, 2 years old. Not exactly, the FSBPT doesn't publish how old those questions are, but really, those are the questions. That's the type of question, that's the format, that's how it's going to be on the exam. And if you're not taking the PET, I really highly recommend that you consider it. And then the final thing is just to report to someone about your progress and to be accountable. You've got to be accountable. And that's something that, again, a lot of people forget to do, is to be accountable to someone else. All right. So here, we're going to try one more time to get this girl in here. Again, please bear with me. See if we can get her in here. Again, she's just got such an amazing story. We're going to try one more time just to get her in. Otherwise, we might have to schedule a follow-up hangout where we can have, I'd like to have a couple of my former students in here talking about what it is that really helped them as they were studying. Now, again, you don't have to be in the mastermind study group to take advantage of all the awesome benefits. I mean, really, as I said, it's not rocket science. You just have to know everything. Just absolutely have to know everything. And so we may be trying that again here in the next couple of weeks, but again, we'll try one more time. Okay, well, looks like she's not going to be able to make it. That's too bad. Yeah, internet issues. Always exciting. Always exciting. Okay. Moving on. Okay, so this is something that, again, I feel like is important to go over. The NPTE, so the FSBPT publishes how many people pass each on their first attempt. Now, I don't know if they keep data on the second attempt or ultimate pass rates. I think they do. I grabbed the data off of the first-time pass rates. Now, if you graduate from a U.S. accredited physical therapy program, your first-time pass rate is about 90%. Now, again, 90%, that's good. But what about those 10% who don't pass? So I don't want you to be in those 10%. Any of you who are coming in from a non-US program or who are foreign trained, that's something where, again, 33%, that's, a third of you are going to pass on the first attempt. And then, when you combine those numbers, overall pass rate's about 82%. So really not terrible for such a large exam to be able to to finally pass that exam. However, it is important to recognize that just because you graduated from a United States physical therapy program does not mean that you absolutely are guaranteed to pass the exam. So again, what I want to do, I want you to be appropriately nervous. I don't want you to be super nervous, I just want you to be appropriately nervous. That makes my students laugh when I tell them to do that. Be appropriately nervous. All right, so when it comes to passing the exam, you've got to know the material well, and especially the basics. And we're going to go through a couple of things that are really required to pass the exam. People who don't know the basic anatomy and the function of muscles, nerves, biomechanics, passive active insufficiency, range of motion, all that sort. If you don't know the basics, you're going to have a heck of a time passing this exam. Just because so much of the test is not, well, it's not memorization, rather it's application of principles. And that can be killer for a lot of folks, especially if you're not familiar with the basics. Take that on the other side, folks who pass the exam know this very well, and I've had a number of friends who say, and I'm in accord with them too, is that if you know the basics, you can take that and apply that to the specific questions on the exam. And so you've got to be able to ponder deeply and really extrapolate all that material out into the question, and that's again something that you have to do to pass this exam. Next thing you have to do is you have to keep cool. Test anxiety is killer, absolutely killer. I can't tell you how many people I've talked with over the years over the 2 years, and it's not like years and years, but test anxiety can be absolutely killer because it causes a physical reaction. You get diaphoresis, you've got the vasoconstriction, sweating, everything. You've got everything going on top of having to sit through this incredibly stressful exam where if you don't pass, you're in trouble, absolutely in trouble. And so this is where there have been books and books written about test anxiety reduction, and my big recommendation would be to go there and listen to what they're telling you, listen to what those books are telling you, be very focused on how you respond to the test and how you can fix that. Now, as far as my secret sauce, and again, this isn't my secret sauce, I guess, it's something that I developed back in the 2nd grade, Will Crane fist pump. This is when you do something right or you do something well, you give yourself a little fist pump. Now, you might say that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but truly there have been studies done on people who focus on negative things, or they focus on what they don't know, they focus on what's difficult. Those are the folks that kind of create a self-fulfilling prophecy that they're, oh, I'm terrible at test taking. So then they become terrible at test taking. Rather, folks who do a little fist pump when there is something they know, you're on the test and you come to a question, you're like, holy cow, I totally know this one. I rock this one. Give yourself a little fist pump and tell yourself that you're awesome. And that's, absolutely critical to be able to stay positive throughout this whole experience. Another thing that you have to do in order to pass the exam is to use time effectively. So this is both with your study time, making sure that when you're studying, you're really studying and not just, osmosis, having your head on the book drooling. Rather, you need to make sure that you've got a plan, and that's why I tell you to write down your weaknesses so that you know what you need to attack. Then, with that efficiency of time while you study, that's going to translate to efficiency on the test, because you're going to be able to pace yourself, you're going to be able to stay focused, laser focused on everything as you go through it. In order to pass the exam, again, I've heard a couple of recommendations, but I really think you need to pass at least 3 practice exams before you really can start having a good bet that you're going to pass the exam. Is it a hard, fast rule? Absolutely not. I mean, there are some people who have not passed a single practice exam and passed the NPTE, and then there's others who have passed a dozen and then don't pass the NPTE. So again, no hard, fast rule on this one, except that you really should be, on a consistent basis, you should be passing those practice exams above 75%. Now, some of the tests are different. Obviously, there have been, a lot of the feedback I've had from students is that the Score Builders tests are maybe a little bit easier than the real test, and the O'Sullivan tests are maybe a little bit harder, or the test that I wrote might be a little bit harder than the exam. And those are the kinds of things you have to keep in mind, that as a general rule, you need to be well above 75% in order to pass the exam. And then really the final thing on how to pass the exam is you've got to stay inspired. If you're not inspired, if you don't have a focus of why it is that you're going through all this pain and agony, why are you going through the misery of studying for this huge exam, if you're not inspired by something, you need to get inspired. So whether that's, for a lot of people, it's just the satisfaction of helping people, and that's something that really keeps you going. This is the career you want. You want to be paid every day for helping people. Or you think about maybe just providing for your family. I want to be able to provide for my family in a way that doesn't require me to be away for so long. I can work a 9-to-5 job basically, or I can work, I don't have to, I can provide well for my family. Anyway, bottom line is I want you to stay inspired. Find what inspires you and then stick with it so that you can keep in mind why it is that you're doing this. All right, so now we get to maybe a little bit of the fun stuff. Well, it's really not that much fun. How to fail the exam. I've had a lot of people who have written me emails in the past. These are not necessarily students of mine, just emails I've gotten, whether it's through Facebook, whether it's just, plain email, whatever. My goal is not to make fun of you, and if you sent me one of these things, again, I tried to paraphrase it, no identifying information. I don't want to make fun, but I do want you to learn from their mistakes of what you need to not do, or what you need to do to fail the exam, which is what you don't want to do. All right, so best thing you can do to fail the exam is to take one practice exam a few days before the exam with kind of a half-hearted effort. There was one student in particular I was working with, and he was a good student throughout PT school. He was having a great time, learned a lot of good stuff. He was really awesome on his clinicals, and then he just thought, well, I've got it in the bag. So he headed into the exam. Things were great until he sat down and he was like, holy cow, I don't know any of this stuff, and that was a real disaster for him. And so he was able to pass on his second attempt, but it was really discouraging for him to be like, holy cow, I know this material, but I can't remember it. I haven't studied it. It's not at the forefront of my mind. And that's something that is really important. You've got to take a couple of practice exams so you know what it's like. Another one is I graduated 3 years ago and just wanted to see if I could pass. I mean, kind of a surefire way of not passing is because, if you haven't looked at the material or thought about it in 3 years, there's just almost zero likelihood that you're going to pass. I failed once, did not study much afterwards, and failed again. That was one that really puzzled me. It's like, oh, well, I took the exam, I didn't do very well, I got a 50% or so. And then as I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, I can kind of remember the stuff off the test. I'll probably be fine. Put in very minimal effort and failed again. That was, it's just kind of sad when you think you go through all that time and effort, 3 months between exams, and you're not going to put the effort in to really make it count. Anyways, that was another one. Another one that comes up more frequently than I wish it would is that, people tell me that they don't really need to study the musculoskeletal because they already, quote unquote, they already know it, or I already knew it. Now, again, a dangerous viewpoint, because most of the exam is that musculoskeletal. There's just so much information to know. There's just no way that you can keep it all at the forefront of your mind all the time. And so you've got to spend time studying everything. You've got to absolutely spend time studying everything. This one is a favorite of mine. I forgot that there were only 5 sections. So this guy was taking the exam, and he gets through section number 5, and he notices on the clock that he's only got about 20 minutes left on the exam. And he says to himself, holy cow, I've got a whole nother section. And so he rushed through as fast as he could, rushed through section number 5. And when he closed out section number 5, it said, congratulations, you've completed the test. And he said, what? There's not a 6th section? He totally forgot where he was, didn't stay focused, and didn't realize that there were only 5 sections. And consequently, it was really that his performance on that final section is just what killed him. And now this same guy, this poor guy, he also was one who decided to move apartments and change jobs 2 weeks before the exam. Again, I told you that you've got to stay cool. You've got to do what you do to stay cool and keep your anxiety down. This guy was just a nervous wreck, absolutely nervous breakdown waiting to happen. So much to consider. Huge board exam, plus changing apartments, changing jobs. It was tough on him, and he did not pass. I really got a laugh out of, well, again, not to poke fun, but I got a laugh at someone who said, I got mad at the FSBPT for writing hard questions, and so rather than studying for the exam, I just got mad and sent a nasty email to FSBPT and then took the exam again and then failed. And that was, again, just sad because, again, you go through all that time and effort, and you got to put the effort into it. And this is, maybe one of the top ones I get is that people who use review books, but rather than actually learning the material, they very lightly open the score builder's book and they look at the nice pictures and the diagrams and they say, oh yeah, I kind of know that. Oh yeah, I kind of know that. Just kind of briefly, light reading, I would say, just enough to be dangerous. But yet, if someone sat them down and said, do you know what the surgical protocol, post-op protocol for rotator cuff repair is, they'd give you the deer in the headlights look. Well, the rotator cuff's in the shoulder, and I remember reading about it. Again, classic Classic, classic. They spend time reading a review book, but they don't spend time actually learning the material. Absolutely critical that you learn the material. And then, that fits very nicely into, I overestimated my knowledge, which we've already kind of talked about before, or underestimated the test. Like, how could they write such a hard test? They would never do that. I will be fine. And then I didn't have time to study, or again, another one of my favorites was, well, I just planned on using the curve to get in. There's a slight curve, and I'm sure I'll get curved in because that's the way it was before. Anyway, there's no way that the curve is going to save you. You've got to, there's only like 0.5% of people who are even close enough to that curve to use it, and it's not going to save you. So there you go. That's how to fail the exam. All right, so this is one where I'm going to give you 72 seconds, just like on the exam. You're going to have 72 seconds. I want you to read through this question. We're going to go through 2 practice questions. Read through this question. I want you to formulate an answer in your mind, and then there's really not, you can use the question and answer box to type in your answer if you'd like, but I would like you to hold off on your answer until the 72 seconds are up. And so I'm running the timer starting now. 72 seconds. I'm going to be totally quiet and let you just answer the question. About 10 more seconds. All right, so why don't you go ahead and type in the question and answer box. Go ahead and type in your answer, and yeah, let's see if we can get any answers in here. Patient who's just had back surgery has significant quad weakness on the right lower leg. While examining the patient's gait from initial contact through the loading response, which of the following anomalies will most likely be present? So again, you're looking here at quad weakness. It's killer for people after back surgery. This is something that happens so frequently. So the correct answer is that let me see if I can get this slide to come up. Okay, so as a person goes through gait with quad weakness, what has to happen, I'm going to see if I can draw this out. See if I can wake this thing up. Anyway, as we go through, here we go. Get my pen going. All right, so a person with quad weakness, what does that mean? That means that as they're going through the initial loading response, that quad cannot activate and do the shock absorption that it needs to do in order to be awesome at absorbing all of the shock, the joint ground reaction forces that occur as you hit the ground. Let me see if I can get my pen going here. I want to draw you a picture of this. Not that I'm an awesome artist, but it just really helps you visualize this whole concept of how quad weakness makes a big difference. Okay, so guys got quad weakness as they're stepping into initial contact with that heel. As the other one's back like that. As they're stepping into initial contact, what happens is in normal gait, their center of gravity is behind their knee, and what happens is the quad over the top of the knee allows it to extend or to flex eccentrically just a little bit. It strikes with almost a perfectly straight leg and then immediately bends slightly in order to absorb those joint reaction forces. Now, if a person has weak quads, what has to happen is that this person leans forward, again, just for exaggeration's sake. They lean forward so that their center of gravity is ahead of the joint axis on the knee. And what happens is this creates a hyperextension force. And with that hyperextension force, it means that they're able to walk with really no quads. And this is something, if you want to try this while you're watching, go ahead and go and stand up and walk around. And if you lean ahead onto that leg, lean ahead onto a straight leg, that was, leaning ahead onto the straight leg. That allows your center of gravity to be ahead of that joint axis, and it allows you to walk without really using your quads. Anyway, that's something that's really key for a lot of people, is that if you've got joint or quad weakness, you're going to walk with that forward leaned or that forward flexed gait, forward flexed trunk. All right, let's go to question number 2. Okay, I'm going to give you another 72 seconds. I'm going to be totally quiet just so you know what it's like on the test. 72 seconds and go. All right, 72 seconds is up. While examining a patient, a physical therapist notes hypomobility of the patient's talocrural joint of the right foot, limiting movement into dorsiflexion completely. Which of the following gait patterns will most likely be observed due to this gait impairment? Okay, so I love this one just because it's something that can really, literally trip people up a lot. And so if a person cannot move into dorsiflexion, what happens is, again, dorsiflexion being defined as from 0 moving upwards into dorsiflexion. If a person cannot move into dorsiflexion, then they're going to be walking with, basically a flat foot. They can move into plantar flexion. There's no mention of plantar flexion issues here, but there is a hypomobility that does not allow them to go into dorsiflexion. Okay, so when you are in mid-stance on the involved foot, what happens is mid-stance is defined as when you get to about 90 degrees in this talocrural joint. Now, in order to go into terminal stance, what has to happen is that the leg rolls forward, and again, for exaggeration's sake, quite exaggerated. As you roll into basically, as you roll that tibia forward, it's creating dorsiflexion in the ankle. And now, if you are unable to dorsiflex, and this is very common after someone has had, has been in a walking boot for a while, they would be weak on the plantar flexors too. But in this case, we're talking just about hypomobility of dorsiflexion. What would happen is they would have to cut the gait cycle short on that side, that the involved side. They would not be able to fully go through terminal stance phase. And since they couldn't go through the terminal stance phase, that's going to be detrimental. It's going to shorten everything, and that's what's going to create what's called the double step gait pattern, where you have different alternating step lengths. One foot steps a normal distance. So in this case, the involved foot would make a normal step, and then the uninvolved foot would take a shorter step, because during terminal stance you'd be significantly shortened on the amount of time. And so that's the kind of, that's the way you need to look at this one. And this is something that really trips up a lot of people, because if you look at the question, again, talking about the question, if you read too much into it, you might be tempted to say steppage gait, because people who have steppage gait have weak dorsiflexors and they're not able to actively lift the foot into dorsiflexion. That's not mentioned here. We have a clear, defined hypomobility that totally eliminates the ability to go into dorsiflexion. Now, when you cannot go into dorsiflexion, that affects terminal stance, which affects step length, which is why double step gait is the most correct answer. Now, circumduction, usually a circumducting gait is caused when you have it's the same kind of with a vaulting gait. Circumduction and vaulting usually occur together from what I refer to as a functionally longer leg. As you have that functionally longer leg, you can't, and it almost categorically happens at the knee joint. If you are unable to bend that knee joint, that's going to make your leg appear longer, especially during the swing phase when you need a little bit of knee flexion. If you don't have any knee flexion, you're going to have to either vault to that hip or circumduct that whole hip to get it to clear the floor so you can advance your step. So again, this is something that trips up a lot of people, is that ankle problems can cause, there is a possibility that they could cause a vaulting or a circumducting gait, but typically ankle problems will result in a double step gait or a steppage gait pattern, or maybe a little bit of vaulting, but mostly the steppage gait. If you've got a talocrural joint that's a little bit, if your foot is stuck in plantar flexion during the swing phase, then you're going to compensate at the knee rather than the hip. That's just easier. And so that's, again, things to consider as you're going through questions like this is don't read too much into it. Take the information they give you and work with it rather than try to extrapolate that into, this one patient you had who wore this AFO who, they had troubles into dorsiflexion, and so therefore, it's got to be the steppage gait when it's not, double step gait. All right, now getting back to how you read or how you answer questions, the key thing is, and I've read this in several books, and this is something that I do. I mean, not that I spend a lot of time other than working with students and helping them dissect questions. What you have to do is read the question. Read the question for the topic, find those keywords, and then really try to understand what the question is asking. Then I recommend that before you look at the answer options, that you spend time formulating an answer in your mind. Once you have that answer in your mind, the next thing you do is you then read through the options and try to eliminate the incorrect ones and try to mark down the best answer. So this is, again, you're doctoral students. Heck, most of you have a doctoral degree or working towards a doctoral degree. You know this stuff. You've done testing before. This is not new information to you. Maybe one little tip I have for you is that I had one student in particular who she was good at looking at a question and formulating an answer quickly, but she used on the test you can use what's called a flagging function, or go back and redo the question. I mean, not the redo, it keeps your answer, but it marks it so that you know which one to come back to. Well, she managed on every single section, on almost every single question, she managed to have enough time to flag it and then go back and redo it and reread it. Now, again, that can be nice if you've got specific doubt about a certain question. However, in her case, it meant that instead of a 250 question test, she was taking a 500 question test because she went through every question at least twice in detail, and it really stressed her out. That's how test fatigue really killed her, because she was doing twice the amount of work in the same amount of time. Therefore, my recommendation to you is only flag the question if it is, top 1% something that you are sure that you don't know, that you really want to come back to. Otherwise, don't flag it, because you'll just end up taking the test twice. So again, you can use it if you want. Take my advice for what it's worth, but flagging it can almost be a detriment in some ways. All right, so just a couple of final thoughts. We're coasting into the last few minutes here. Final thoughts: in order to succeed on the exam, you've got to organize your time. Okay, so let's talk specifically about those of you who are taking the exam 7 days from now, 7 or 8 days, on the 22nd and 23rd of July. You've got 7 days. Hopefully you've got 7 days so that you can potentially study. Now, again, I say potentially because this depends on your level of preparation. Now, if you're the sort of a person who's just barely figuring out what diabetes is, or just barely starting to understand what rotator cuff repairs are, that's going to be a sign that you've got a lot of work ahead of you. And just so you know, you are able there's two conflicting things on the FSBPT site. They say you can change your exam for only $25, or another part says it takes $50 to change it. But in any case, to change the date of your exam, it's only really a relatively small proportion of the amount of money you've paid. If you do it at least 5 days, and so you've only got a couple of days to decide. If you do it at least 5 days before the exam, it only costs a few bucks, between 25 and 50 bucks, and you can reschedule and have more time to prepare. Now, that's a hard decision to make. I certainly cannot make that decision for you. If you're taking the exam next week and you feel extremely nervous, you feel like you don't know the material, you haven't been passing the test, practice exams, and there's just a lot of basic material you don't know, chances are you'd be better off not taking the exam unless you had unlimited resources and the state you were trying to apply in allowed unlimited attempts. So like New York State is awesome in that regard. They say you can take an unlimited number of attempts, although the FSBPT does cap the number of attempts at 18. So make sure you finish the exam in less than 18 attempts. All right, so if you're going to be taking the exam next week, what do you need to do to prepare for it? All right, so I still recommend, I still stick by the list, make a list of weaknesses. Now, this list of weaknesses can be something that you just put together, formulate in your own mind, just, something sweet and simple that, you just think about it. Or I recommend even more that you use those practice exams you've taken to really hone in. It's like, holy cow, musculoskeletal is killer for me. So let me find 2 or 3 or 5 specific things in musculoskeletal that I need to do better. Typically, it's interventions, and examination, and maybe evaluation. It's a little bit of everything, differential diagnosis, everything. But if you go through the material with a fine-tooth comb, find the things that are hard for you, find the things that you're not succeeding in, focus your time on those rather than just open up a review book and start reading from page 1. Because honestly, you'll lightly gloss over it. You might get, you might understand it a little bit, but at the end of the day, you're not going to have the information materialized or really internalized, materialized inside your mind, everything. So again, make a top 10 list, work through the top 10 as much as you can over the next week. If you get through the top 10 and you feel confident that you've understood those top 10 weaknesses, make another 10 and just work your way through weaknesses. That's where your best time is going to be spent. Another final thought is just to review all of the material. For those of you who are taking the exam in October or maybe next year, you've got a lot of time to review the material. And I wish that I'd understood this better when I was in physical therapy school, was that I didn't have to wait until I graduated to start studying the material. Especially those of you who are entering into your 3rd year or who are taking the exam, maybe next year. You've got lots of time, and this is where you need to organize your time. I highly recommend you go to my website, go to ptfinalexam.com, look at the top, you'll find resources, click on resources, and you'll find the study outline that will really guide you through the material in a way that you'll be able to understand what it is you need to do to pass the exam and find out what your weaknesses are. And then you can focus on your weaknesses. And then one of the final things is that you just have to be accountable. You've got to be accountable to someone, whether it's your spouse, whether it's a classmate, whether it's, I've got a person I'm working with right now who uses people down at the gym where she works at. She talks to athletic trainers about everything she's learning in, as she's studying for the exam. In those cases, I mean, you've got to find someone to tell and to be accountable to about this information. That's something that's absolutely critical, to have someone to be accountable to. And maybe, again, that's one of the strengths of the Mastermind Study Group series, is that you're accountable to me, for whatever that's worth for you. That's something that is so beneficial for so many people, is just to have someone to bounce ideas off of, someone to ask, am I on the right path? Someone to be on a telephone call with and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. What can you tell me about it? And that's something that has really worked for a lot of students. Really, really worked for a lot of students. All right, so I want to tell you about, again, this is something that I've been working on for a long time. Those of you who don't like studying with other people, those of you who are looking for just an individual way to study, this is something that, again, I've been working on for a long time. I've got my 200 practice questions, which, as I said, they're really comparable to those Sullivan questions as far as the scores that students have been reporting to me. 8 hours of recorded video lectures. If you want more of me, for what it's worth, you'll get lots and lots of practice questions. These are new practice questions, either ones that I wrote or ones that I rewrote from other ones, and again, lots and lots of really useful material. This is stuff that you'll notice that when you try to join the Mastermind Study Group, it goes for over $300. That's it's really cool stuff, really, really good stuff. And so if you want the self-study guide, giving you the Facebook promo that's going to be available for a limited number or a limited time. $50 off this thing. This is going to be maybe one of the most important things you do as you study for the exam, is just to hear things in a different way, to have the videos, to have the whole syllabus, to be able to do self-study if you want. Otherwise, you're welcome to join the Mastermind Study Group. That's something that, again, I've been getting a lot of questions about that. I have posted the dates for the next one. We're going to be starting at the beginning of September. Please sign up soon. It's going to fill up fast. I'm going to have, yeah, you just got to sign up soon if you want to be in it. And yeah, check out, again, when you go to ptfinalexam.com, you'll find the resources tab up at the top. That's where you can find information more about this home study bundle, as well as at the top you'll find the Mastermind Study Group's sign up page, which you can get more reviews from people who have taken the exam. Yeah, great place to find more information about the whole thing. And then, yeah, let's start going through questions. Okay, so you've got questions over here on the side. I'm going to try to answer just as many as I can. I'm going to start up at the top. Those of you, you'll notice that as you +1 them, that's going to be, as you +1 them, that's going to give them a certain number of votes so that I know which ones are the most popular for you or the most important for you. Or if there's one that you want that's unique, I'm going to try to go through as many as I can. We'll be here, hopefully not here too long, but in essence, all right, here we go. How much of an emphasis is on pharmaceuticals? So again, you can look at the FSBPT content outline and you'll find that for each section there is a portion that is addressing pharmaceutical management of different conditions, diabetes, cardiovascular. It's usually cardiovascular or some type of neuromuscular condition. So you have to know the major players in the pharmaceuticals. Now, there's not going to be a ton of questions on that. Honestly, we're talking, maybe 10, maybe 20 specific questions if they incorporate it into different, because that's the thing, they love to incorporate several topics into one question. And so, yeah, you could have multiple questions addressing pharmaceuticals. However, bottom line is that you need to know basic pharmaceutical interventions for most of the major conditions. And so we're talking about the beta blockers, calcium channel inhibitors, the ACE inhibitors, as you go through, like levodopa, Parkinson's, muscular dystrophy, cystic fibrosis, kind of the major players in all of those. And that's something that really shouldn't be too challenging, but I highly recommend, this is maybe one of the least known secrets to man, is that you have to almost create a table for all of these things. This is something that I recommend for all of my students, is that as you create a table with the information, list beta blockers on the side, examples of beta blockers, mechanism of action, and diagnoses where it's used. That's something that's going to be incredibly useful to you as you go through especially those of you who are 7 days before the exam. If you had made a little table like that, that's the thing that you would be reviewing right now. So yes, a little bit of an emphasis on pharmaceuticals. Maybe not killer, but there's definitely some. All right, let's see. Next one. Is the difficulty level of the PT final exam the same as the PET exam, therapy ed practice questions? Again, I can speak from the scores I'm getting that the scores are usually pretty analogous to the O'Sullivan therapy ed questions. And probably, though, they're likely an average between the score builders and the therapy ed, but more along the lines towards the therapy ed. As to the PET exam, again, right, usually the O'Sullivan questions are more difficult than the PET and the NPTE, and so my questions are more along, maybe not quite to the O'Sullivan level, but right up there close, just based on the scores that people are reporting to me. And if you want to report your score to me, if you've taken both, report your score and give me your opinion. That would be awesome too. Okay, let's see. I've heard that the O'Sullivan study book is too in-depth and that the score builders adequately covers all the necessary information. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on study materials? Again, I'll tell you what I did when I was taking the exam. I used the score builders book exclusively. I had not purchased the O'Sullivan book. But as I've been going through, side-by-side comparison of both of them, I've noticed that the score builders is much easier to read, but the O'Sullivan has a lot more depth to it. And so, yes, the O'Sullivan probably has more information than you need. However, consider, though, that most of the questions that you'll be facing require you to understand deep principles, not just superficial memorization, which I think is the strength of the O'Sullivan book, is that you're dealing with primarily, deep principles there and understanding topics, and that's something that's really, really important. So any other thoughts or opinions on study materials? I just got done putting together, as a part of that home study bundle, I've got over 200 pages worth of study outlines and notes that I've helped complete, that some of my students have helped complete, that are ways of looking at things and maybe a little bit different. They're organized by table. In fact, almost the whole 200 pages are tables. Tables are bullet points, which I think is a real strength because it, really puts things very clearly and very succinctly. So that's something you might consider checking out. Let's see. What are your thoughts on the study books of O'Sullivan Score Builders? One is more helpful. I think we kind of answered this one, but hard to say. It's kind of a toss-up between your two favorite kids. O'Sullivan, less pictures, more information. Score Builders, more pictures, a little less detail. Bottom line, though, I do want you to understand this, that the test, the NPTE, is written not from the review books, but is written from the actual physical therapy textbooks. So McGee, Dutton, Kisner and Colby, Kendall, the O'Sullivan, physical rehabilitation book. All of those books are where, Norkin, all of those books are where the test questions come from. And so as a part of any study plan, you don't want to have just the review book. You want to be going to the original source too, because that's where the questions come from. That's where they're actually written from. Let's see, what's a good way to start preparation? How do you, at the very beginning, what you need to do is you need to really understand the content outline. So going to the fsbpt.org website, you'll find the published content outline, or another good way is to go on the PT final exam. You'll find in the resources the study outline that, again, fleshes it all out for you, and then what you have to do is just go down the list, check it off as you go down, so that you're covering all of the material. So with the outline, that's something I would recommend. With the outline in hand, I would have you then go to the original textbooks. Well, yeah, you could go, it's hard to do it simultaneously, but going to the review book and the textbooks, especially that O'Sullivan one, which has more information, going to the original textbooks, though, that's where the questions come from. So you've got to spend time there. Let's see, what could be the best strategy for studying for the NPTE? If you want to even just go to the Mastermind Study Group sign-up page, you'll notice that I offer the syllabus. You can just free download the syllabus. If you want to just do self-study, I recommend you follow that syllabus to a T, because that takes you through all of the content outline, plus it makes you really review everything and write it down. Because if you're not writing things down, that's, again, a big mistake people are making, is that they're spending too much time just reading material rather than actually writing and internalizing things. I'm feeling that I'm forgetting what I've learned last week. So you've got to, if you've just got to write it down. If you're not writing things down, you're not adequately studying. If you hate writing things down, plan B could be talking to someone else about it and explaining it to someone. But if you're not writing it down, you're not really studying. And that's, again, for what it's worth, that's the Will Crane strategy, is that you've got to spend time making it go into your eyes and out through your fingertips so that you've got the information down. Do I recommend taking as many practice exams as possible prior to the exam? I've had some people who have taken up to, let's see, I think there's only about a dozen available. If you count the 2 from Pete, 3 from each of the Score Builders book, or Score Builders O'Sullivan, plus 2 online advantage tests, plus mine. I mean, that gets you up to 9, 10, 11. Plus, I think there's another one on Amazon. Anyway, so if you take a dozen, yes, that could be helpful, but really, the question is, are you understanding the material and are you passing those exams? If you're taking all 12 and not really passing any of them, that's going to be a sign that you're in trouble. I think that an adequate number would be between 4 and 6. That kind of is a ballpark figure for you to target. You don't have to, but that's, again, just the ballpark. All right, next one, how to concentrate during the actual NPTE. Whew, that's a hard question. What if we get lost in between? It is really difficult to focus on the screen for such a long time. I guess the attention is really valuable. Why don't they just test in paper format, such as the PCE? Now you're talking, let's see, is that the Canadian exam? I can't remember. But anyway, why is it this way? I can't say that I know. I do know that the FSBPT spends a lot of time in researching the best way to test this material so that they know, so that they can make sure that the test is requiring competence and that we can now have confidence in our practitioners that they actually know something. So how to study during exam, my favorite thing to do to tell people is just to practice. Take a practice exam and practice it at the time of day you're going to be taking the exam, whether that's morning, mid-morning, afternoon, early afternoon, and just spend time, practice. Deep breathing techniques, meditation, maybe, I don't know, there have been books written on this, and so that's a hard one, and I'm not sure I gave you an awesome answer to it, but just practice. Let's see, I'm not taking the exam until April of 2015. If I bought study materials now, will they be up to date for the exam? That is a good question. Usually the O'Sullivan and the score builders are updating a little bit every year, but you'll notice in their updates that maybe 1% of the book is different, or there might be a different color in a different chapter or a different picture on the cover, something to make it new and exciting. But for the most part, 1% is what would be different. And again, remember that the information for the test is coming out of the actual therapy books. And so if you have your actual therapy books and you're actually spending time understanding principles out of those, you'll be just fine with a 1-year-old, or in your case, it would be 9 months old by the time we got to April 2015. Again, this is barring anything dramatic, any dramatic change in the content, but there's not going to be anything dramatic. Nothing happens dramatically. It's always inch by inch. And so between now and next year, chances are you'd probably be fine with this year's textbook. Is your syllabus in the bundle? Yes. In fact, I personalized that syllabus in that bundle. I personalized it for students who would not be taking the class with us in that home study bundle. This means that you can just follow the exam. I recommend working on it 1 week at a time and have about a 6-week, basically a 6-week, holy cow, I'm going to die phase where you're going through all this material. And then once you have gone through that phase, then you can start focusing in on the things that are more difficult for you and still have the notes and review back, very lightly the things that you've already learned. And so that's my recommendation. All right, let's see. Quick tips for a week from now and the real exam. Good luck. It's, this test is a killer. One of the things that I talk about a lot with students is do everything you can to not do anything different this week. So what I mean is don't move apartments, don't break up with your boyfriend, girlfriend, don't make any life-changing decisions about what career or what job you're going to take after you pass the exam. As much as you can, eat good food, get lots of good sleep, and as best you can, try not to think about being anxious. Rather, think about how much you know, how much you've gone over, and then just super hyper focus on weaknesses so that then you can make them strengths. That's the key. Don't focus on them just so you get your heart rate up. Rather, focus on your weaknesses so that you know what to study this last final week. And really, if your exam is on Tuesday, you do a little bit of studying on Tuesday or on Monday, but don't knock yourself out the day before the exam. Cramming at this stage of the game, cramming is not going to be really that much of a benefit to you. Rather, you need to just spend time reviewing what you already know. That's going to be the big key. Plus, a mistake that I made when I was taking the exam, I showed up to the testing center about 3 hours early, before the sun was up, before the testing center was even, before the doors were even open, lights turned on, nothing. I was the only one in the parking lot, just me sitting there. I had purchased the Score Builders app, which has got lots of practice questions, and I was sitting in the parking lot just psyching myself out, considering how bad I was going to do on the exam. I wished I hadn't given myself 3 hours to sit in the parking lot. I wished I'd been more like 30 to 45 minutes. Again, so I was plenty early, but not so much that I was psyching myself out for a couple hours. All right, let's see. How do you use the calculator when you take the exam on the computer? That's a good question. That's a good question that I don't know the answer to exactly. You'll have to call the Prometric Center where you're going to be testing and talk to them about the calculators that are available. Now you will likely have some small calculation, whether it's like a heart rate using the Borg RPE scale and trying to figure out what percentage of estimated, let's see, age predicted heart rate maximum. That's what I'm trying to say, using the Borg scale to predict that, or using the scale to decide how long a ramp needs to be in order to have a 1% grade or a 112, it's an 8% grade, or a 112 pitch. Anyway, you will have some light calculations. Most of them will be able to be done on paper quite simply, but you can call the Prometric Center to talk about calculators. A study bundle and study group, do we need both? You really just need one or the other. I created the study bundle for people who hate working with other people. That's something that, again, I've noticed, and that's something that really my wife suggested, because she really dislikes working as a group, because as a group, she gets a little bit distracted by what other people are saying, and she'd rather just sit there with her own thoughts. And so that's why I created that study bundle for folks who didn't want to join the group. Now, if you want to join the group, you'll get all of the same material. Basically, you're paying a little bit extra for my time so that you'll be able to spend time with me. And if you want, we can schedule Skype chats, emails, telephone calls. Sometimes telephone calls are all it takes. And, that can be one of the easiest things to do, is just to sit and chat for 15 minutes. All right, what is the link if I want to purchase the bundle? So the easiest thing to do is go to PT Final Exam, go to the Resources tab at the top, and you'll see just on that drop-down list or the drop-down menu that there's the PT Final Exam Home Study Bundle. It's right there. Don't forget to enter the promo, Facebook promo, give you $50 off. That'll be awesome. Thank you so much. Let's see, is there a miniature version of the ACSM guidelines for exercise? I guess I didn't know there was well, I'm sure there's a bigger version. When I was in school, we were required to purchase the ACSM guidelines for exercise, which was honestly a small booklet. We're talking 30 to 50 pages. Really, I guess it might have been 80 pages, but it really wasn't that big of a book. Just head to Amazon for that one. The sun's starting to come in the window over there. All right, so let's see. How to deal with the time limit of the PT Final Exam. Our mind really gets fatigued answering 250 questions continuously for 5 hours. We talked about fatigue, deep breathing exercises, being able to, you've got to stay focused. And for some of you, that's really challenging. If you have an actual disability, like some type of attention deficit disorder, or you've got really clinical test anxiety. I had a student of mine who requested extra time on the exam and was given extra time so she could go a little bit slower through the questions. And she could take more breaks. She could, pause for an extra 5 minutes here or there and take a couple of deep breaths. Again, if you're in that would be a special case scenario that you would have to talk to the FSBPT about. But they do make some small accommodations for students with really verifiable and diagnosable issues like that. A little guide about the Canadian exam. I really can't speak to any authority about the Canadian exam other than they test most of the same material, and if you know enough stuff for the if you know enough stuff for the American exam, you're going to be in really great shape for the Canadian exam. Let's see. You do not have a study partner to bounce off topics appearing in October. Have all the materials said but need support. Ladies and gentlemen, can we start a thread group of 5s? Yeah, so on the event page if you want to do that, or most of you folks came over here from Facebook. That would be another great place to try to track down a study partner. And there's a lot of benefit in study partners to, again, have that accountability. So let's see, how early to start studying? That is a good question. How early to start studying? So I've noticed that people do the best when they go through the material about 6 weeks before the exam. Now, before those 6 weeks, you should be spending time in deep study, meaning that you're learning the stuff you learn in therapy school. You're learning what joint mobilizations are. You're learning what, all the ranges of motion, muscle origin, insertion, action, innervation, brachial plexus, sacral plexus. You're learning all that information. But when it comes down to really hardcore, you are going to be studying now, and it is time for deep preparation mode. Sometime in the 6-week to 12-week mark before the exam is really the time when it's going to give you the most benefit, because otherwise, if you do all your deep studying now and you're not taking the exam until April, you'll kind of forgotten most things. Now it'll still be in there, yes, and so I don't want to dissuade you from studying earlier rather than later. But when it comes to your heavy-duty studying, 6 to 12 weeks before the exam is going to be about the time frame you're going to need. And again, depending on, now most students either take the exam within 90, most of them take it within 90 days of graduation. And usually you're a pretty good bet for those 90 days between, now it doesn't have to be exactly 90 days, and this is just speaking broadly, but spending about that much time from the time you graduate until the time you sit for the exam, that's going to be the time that you're going to be spending, or going to be best spent heavy-duty studying for the exam. But if it feels so overwhelming, so maybe be more towards the 12-week mark, and then now if you're taking the exam in October, you definitely should start now. If you're taking the exam next year, you need to make sure to review the content outlines, make sure you understand what's going to be on the test, and then start, go through that as much as you can. Let's see, vital values like blood pressure values for hypertension, they differ. So they differ in all these books. Which value should we write in the final exam? It's really confusing. So they're not going to test you on, in which book, in the McGee book, this is what it says about this particular blood pressure. What does McGee say about that? They're not going to ask questions like that. Rather, they're going to spend time talking about broad topics, and they'll ask you what's generally a good blood pressure, what's generally a bad blood pressure. And so if you know those general terms and general guidelines, you're going to be in really good shape. Let's see, how many hours per day of deep study review prior to the exam is sufficient for success? It's totally different for everybody because it depends on your base knowledge. If you have zero base knowledge, you better be spending 8 to 12 hours a day studying. If you, like I have a student right now who has been a TA for an anatomy class for a couple of semesters, has been really reviewing this material lightly for the last couple of years. In her case, we're talking maybe 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours a day, as kind of a broad guideline. Totally depends on what your confidence and your competence level is with the material thus far. If you feel very incompetent, then you should be spending more time. Let's see, what is the difference between your PT Final Exam bundle and the home study course? It's the same thing. It's the home study bundle course. I guess I need to clarify that, but it's the same thing. The bundle includes the videos, the syllabus, the 200 questions, plus a couple of I keep writing questions just for fun. It's it's very challenging to write good questions, and so I've written another 40 on top of those 200. So you've got almost a full 250, plus the notes from numerous students, numerous things that I've added, and another 200 pages. And this is really beneficial if you're not in the country right now. Like I know there are a couple of you tuning in from Kuwait, a couple of you from India. You're going to really benefit from having access to some electronic materials, and that's going to be really key for you. You can tell the sun is just about to set over there in the west. Those of you on the east coast, it's been set for hours. And those of you on the west coast, it's it's almost time for it to set. Let's see. What could be the probability changes of passing the NPTE if we go with the Mastermind Study Group? All right, so again, I've been trying to compile numbers about people who take my course and how they fare on the exam. Not everybody who takes my course passes the exam, and there's no course out there that guarantees a 100% pass rate. That's just that is not possible. Because I've noticed that I have a number of students who try to join my group, but then they try to modify usually the first sentence out of their mouths is, oh well, this looks really, really hard. Maybe I can just read through it and then report back to you, just say that I read it. And again, there's no way that I know, there's no accountability there. It's like, okay, well, great, yeah, you read it, that's fine. And that's, that's all well and good, except that it doesn't really work. And so what I recommend is that if you're going to take the class, the course that I do, that you're ready for a lot of hard work. But if you do that hard work, I've got a high 90% rate of passing for students who do everything I say and ask me questions. They pass. The people who do not do what I say have a heck of a time trying to pass the exam. Let's see. When you say 6 to 12 weeks before the exam, how many hours per day? I think we addressed this. It depends on your knowledge base so far. Is it feasible to study when working full time? For most of you, I think most of you are working. I mean, it is feasible, but very difficult, especially if you've got a family, heavy-duty work schedule, and you're trying to study for this exam. You're going to be just in a lot of trouble by the time it comes time for exam time. Anyway, what I mean is that get as many hours as you can in. So if you're working full time, that's probably going to be more along the lines of between 2 and 4 hours a day, with an extra 8 to 12 on Saturdays. But that's kind of what we're talking about. Let's see. Can I record more? I'll try to record more, sure. Let's see. Graduated 8 years back. Syllabus is so vast. Where to start? How many hours need to study per day to give exam after 8 months? Again, if you've got 8 months to study, you should plan on 2 to 4 hours a day. If you've got 8 weeks to study, you better be planning on more like 8 hours a day. But in your case, 8 months, I think you can get by with just 2 to 4 hours. Can I share a proper schedule to prepare for October? So go to the Mastermind Study Group sign-up page, and that's where you can download for free the syllabus, so you can see what the syllabus is on my Mastermind Study Group, and that will be a good guide for a schedule to prepare for the exam. It gives you specific it has the study outline attached to it, and so what you'll do is you'll have topics, you'll have assignments, and you'll be required to go through those assignments. And if you do all of those assignments before the exam and do them completely and fully, you'll be in really good shape. What is the cost of the Mastermind Study Group? $329 for the early registration. It does jump up to $429 after September 1st. So grab your spot early. That's going to be the really the best way to jump in on that. Let's see. Do we have to refer to other books like Kisner, Physical Rehabilitation, and others? Yes. Just for the reasons I discussed earlier, that you have to be able to you have to know the material from the actual source. If you don't know it from the source, you're going to be in trouble. It's going to be tough on you. Let's see. I got the O'Sullivan book by Therapy Ed. I found that doing the practice tests have helped me hone into my weak areas. Taking the test in a week. Awesome. Yes. Use those practice exams to discover your weaknesses. That's key. Mentioned that you should pass 1 to 3 exams prior to taking the NPTE. I have passed multiple exams at the target score slightly above. Is this sufficient? Speaking from broad experience that I've had with students, yes. Typically it's sufficient. Is it a guarantee? Absolutely not. But for the most part, if you're passing practice exams, if you're slightly above on the score builders exams, you might be in trouble, but if you're slightly above on like the O'Sullivan or the Pete exams, then you're going to be really in pretty good shape. I love this. Already started the Will Crane fist pump. Nice. Cheers for that. Cheers for that. Can you be around if we start a thread? Would love to get your free guidance. Absolutely. I'll be around on both the Google Plus. So on this event page, you can do some chatting and information, or on the go over to my. And this is another thing. I would, if there's 134 of you still here, if all of you went to Facebook and liked ptfinalexam.com, that would be a huge favor to me. Just for spending the time to do this, I would really, really appreciate that if you gave me a Facebook like. And then on the PT Final Exam Facebook page, that's where we can start this thread. So that's where I recommend starting the thread on the PT Final Exam page. Have you ever thought of giving some study material for free? Absolutely. I give away 40 free questions. I give away the study outline, which tells you exactly what you need to study. The syllabus really really describes in detail what needs to happen. Yeah. There's also something, you know, I've still got 158 of you here, and this is something maybe we can talk about this on the Facebook thread here in a little while, but I've been pondering starting an internship. So I work at a rural hospital, and so it would be no cost for the internship. And as a part of, I think this is the coolest thing. I wish I'd known about this when I was going through my clinical rotations. The hospital where I am actually has some apartments that are available for students who are here completing internships for a specific amount of time. The apartments are free for students, and you know, it's nothing fancy, but it is a free place to live, plus a 1 meal a day stipend at the cafeteria. Again, nothing to be impressed about, but you would get free housing, free food. You'd be able to work with me on a daily basis for 4, 6, 8 weeks, whatever, depending on your, if you want to do this through a school affiliation, that would be awesome. I love having students, and that, you know, I've talked to a lot of people who've been really interested in something like that. And so message me on Facebook if you're interested in that. I'll be talking more, I'll post that on my Facebook page too, but if you're really interested in doing one of your affiliations here with me, I told you I work in a rural hospital where I get to see a little bit of everything. Now, our schedule is not killer, so we see between 8 and 12 patients a day on you know, my particular schedule. So it's really quite doable. And then we could go over practice material for the NPTE, and that's, I just had a student a couple weeks ago, and that was extremely useful for her as she was here as we talked about all this stuff. So that would be something to consider if you're going through your final rotations, or if you want to just do a 6-week rotation here. That would be awesome, or 4 weeks, or whatever you want. Let's see. Sir, could you please give out 200 musculoskeletal, let's see, I think that's musculoskeletal questions as a compliment for those who are attending the webinar. Thanks. Wouldn't that be exciting? Yeah, head on over to ptfinalexam.com where you can purchase the full 200 questions. And again, the reason why I charge for those is I hope you recognize that though there was a lot of work that went into those. It took me almost 6 months of every spare moment to write those questions, and so if I'm not super willing to just give them away, you'll know why. So anyway, that's why. Sorry about that, Aman. Let's see, if we register, can we get the study material immediately? Absolutely, yeah, email me. Once you register, just email me and let me know. I prefer, now I'll tell you what I prefer, is that I prefer that you work through the assignments first, looking at all of the different material rather than just copying and pasting, because that's a sign of someone who really knows their stuff, is if they're able to really write down the material for themselves. And so yes, I can send it to you with a little bit of hesitancy that I don't want that to preclude you from actually doing it. Let's see. Any iPhone apps? So I love iPhone apps. I used the Score Builder's iPhone app exclusively when I was preparing. I do have, if you want my 200 questions on an app format, you can also buy those. But you know, kind of the bang for your buck, I recommend the Score Builders one. I've really enjoyed that. Let's see, what is the difference between steppage and double step? Steppage, you have increased hip and knee flexion to clear the toe over the floor, and double step gait is where one leg's step is shorter than another step. Yeah, we're just flying through these questions. This is great. How long do we have access to the home study materials? They are yours forever, so you'll have access to them as long as you need. Is the NPTE book O'Sullivan sufficient? No, no review book is sufficient if you don't have the base knowledge out of the actual textbooks. So you need the actual textbooks if you want to really, you know, make sure that you're doing it absolutely right. The O'Sullivan book would probably be, you know, really a pretty good start. Where do I find the free syllabus? I didn't get it at the final exam website. So if you head over to, up on the upper portion of the site, you'll see a Mastermind Study Groups tab. Click on that and you'll get to the sign up page. If you scroll down the sign up page, you'll see a hyperlink for the syllabus itself. So it's on that page. If you still can't find it, please email me. That'd be great. And the email is admin@ptfinalexam.com, or there's the contact form on the website, or Facebook. You can go to PT Final Exam on Facebook and you'll find me there. For someone who is starting to study, do you recommend taking a practice test before studying? kind of up to you. Taking that practice exam is not going to be a real indication of your knowledge because you won't have studied anything. It could help you. It could help give you some direction, but I'm not sure that I would do it right out of the gates. I'd maybe study for a week or two and then take your first practice exam. I don't know. It's kind of up to you on that one. It depends on your knowledge base again. Okay, so please tell what the recorded video lecture consists of. So this is material that is from former mastermind study groups, and what it is we go through about 10 practice questions on each time, but we go through the material behind it. So I spend a lot of time drawing out the material. I draw out different diagrams. I describe. We spend a lot of time on GATE. We spend a lot of time on just reviewing what to look for in the question. So most of it is spent in using review questions as a framework for studying material. And so that's what it is. Let's see. Can you suggest some good books for sample NPTE questions? The best one is the PEAT, for sure. That's available on the FSBPT website. But the Score Builders and O'Sullivan also have great questions. Or my questions also great. If I'm giving an exam in January, when do I join the course? You would be joining the course. It would be at the end of November, beginning of December. That would probably be your best bet. I haven't posted those dates yet. I need to work on getting a year schedule out. But once we get closer to the October date, that's when I'll announce the dates for December. And all of the sessions I've found that Saturday mornings are the best time because that's when I can get the most people here. So again, that's when it'll be, Saturday mornings in December. How to make handouts like what it is important in various sections so it'll be easy to go through them at last. I recommend making tables using diagnoses. So like musculoskeletal diagnoses, we're talking about rotator cuff repairs, ACL repairs, meniscal repairs. Go through, we're just talking musculoskeletal. Go through all those different diagnoses and then list the examination findings that you'd find if you were looking at that patient. You'd talk about differential diagnosis. What would be different about this one that would make it specific or different, how you would know that was it. And then as you go through tables, making various things about that, or various entries about examination, evaluation, differential diagnosis, intervention, prognosis, plan, all of that, as you go through those diagnoses, that's going to be the way that you really put it all together. And that's, I find it really useful as a therapist, as a clinician too, that it puts all of the information together. What is the appropriate score in a practice test? We talked about that, 75%. What's a good book for musculoskeletal? There's McGee publishes, this is the one that I have, called Orthopedic Physical Assessment, if I can remember the title exactly. But I know Dutton also has one. If you need specifics, you can email me about that one. After looking at your exam syllabus, there's some pathway before today. It was totally overwhelming with the syllabus topics. Yes, this is doable. You can totally do this. There's a lot of people that do this. You're going to be in good shape. You can do this. So that's my whole plan. That's my whole role. I'm the coach. I'm the physical therapist that helps guide people through the problem. I spend a lot of time educating you about what's on the test, how to prepare for the test, and then what you need to do to pass the test. And the people who do that pass the test. What are your thoughts on the online advantage practice exams and how well does it correlate with the NPTE? Again, probably on par with the NPTE, maybe slightly easier, but just slightly. Again, nothing too fancy. Is 100 days enough to complete studies from scratch and appear for the exam? Yes, it's enough. It does depend on your prior knowledge, though, if you remember anything from your physical therapy training or if you're starting totally from scratch. What sort of advice do you have for those starting their third year, primarily of rotations? So in your rotations, I want you to be focusing on asking yourself the question, do I know what to do with this diagnosis specifically? Do I know what tests and measures are required? Do I know how to measure it and how differential diagnosis would fit in, meaning how could you distinguish it from something else? So once you understand all of that, take that and consider each case as they walk in the door as if it was a test question. Okay, what would this person's gait look like? You can see on the schedule beforehand you've got someone with a meniscal repair. This is what their gait's going to look like. And then observe them as they walk in. Make sure you know what their gait looks like. Or just spend time asking the right questions to people. Where does it hurt? How much does it hurt? How long has this been taking? Pay attention to protocols. how long it takes to get better from something. So that's what you can spend your third year doing, plus maybe opening a review book and going over a topic or two every week. Again, just you're lightly reviewing, but becoming familiar with topics. And then asking your clinical instructor, how do you look at this? What do you think about stage 3 pressure ulcers? And start a discussion that, again, it helps get some clinical information in, and then I think it really helps. Now, let's see, when is the pattern of your course? How are the classes held? So the classes are held via a program called Adobe Connect. So you just have to have an Adobe Connect, well, I send you the link. You just have to have an Adobe Flash player. So you don't have to download anything other than the Adobe Flash player, which is free. And then once I send you the link for the course, what happens is that then I appear as the lecturer, or I guess the moderator of everything, and we go through lots of material, and there's a chat box, and I can even turn on your microphone if you want to ask a question either via chat or via voice. That's a good way to do it. And so again, it's been really beneficial for a lot of people. Where is the outline available on your website? Go to the Mastermind Study Group tab, and then as you click on that, well, no, you're talking about the study outline. So there is a search function on the tab if you want to look for that. Otherwise, you can go to the Resources tab, and you'll find study outline there. What about other systems like integumentary, obstetrics, gynecology, cardio? How much time do I have to study for them? Check out the content outlines on the fsbpt.org website, and you will find that they are represented. Let's see, I don't have the percentages right off the top of my head, but it's not a big percentage. So head over there and you'll be able to find more specific information about that. Who gave you your haircut? My wife is my stylist. Let's see, I hear of a blue book and red book for the NPTE. What are the names of these books? That's a good question. Those are old school things for the NPTE. I don't think they're used anymore. All right, so we'll get rid of that one. Let's see. It's so vast. I don't know what is important, which book to refer to, what to learn. So confusing. Check out the syllabus. It's going to give you some guidance. It's going to tell you what to do. I'm planning to start preparing for the NPTE exam. Can you recommend how to plan and prepare for the exam? I really highly recommend you check out that syllabus and then the study outline, which is in the syllabus. It's a one-stop shop. If you want something for free, if you want some coaching, that's where the Mastermind Study Group comes into play. Let's see. Did you have a student around 70% of the PEAT pass the actual exam? I can't think of any particular example except that people who are not passing the PEAT usually don't pass the exam, barring them studying really hard between the time they take the PEAT and the NPTE. So maybe. If we plan on buying your material for $249, should we just go buy your material in the initial stage and later with the NPTE therapy ed? I'm not sure what's in your recordings, the material. So the material, again, we talked a little bit about what's in the recordings. We go over practice questions, topics, plus just explaining it in hearing it is really beneficial for a lot of folks. There's no way that I could possibly go over every single topic in great detail. In fact, most schools take about 3 years to do that. And so your big goal should be using the study outline to guide what material you need to go over. And then what you'll do is you use those video lectures. They go over a lot of the hardest parts, like gait questions, cardiopulmonary questions. I mean, it goes over a lot of specific examples in those. And in those cases, well, you are definitely going to require the standard physical therapy textbooks in conjunction with it, because that's where all the material is. But if you follow the syllabus, watch the videos, and then complete the assignments, I found that to be the best way for people to study. That's just hands down the most active, best way to study. Let's see, have I downloaded free the Absolute Crisp? If it's going to be that structured, Mr. Crane, I am in. Awesome. It is definitely structured, and that's the nice part is you have access to, again, to toot my own horn maybe, is that I've worked with over 200 students doing this. I know what it takes. I know what studying is like. I know what you're going through, and I can help you, and that's what I want to do. And so if you need help, that's what I'm here for. questions you already answered. I'm not taking the exam until 2015. Is it most beneficial to be part of it right now or before the exam? Best not to take the, if I'm taking the boards in April. Right. I recommend that you take, I do a study group before in each quarter. So basically about 8 to 10 weeks before the exam. And so, yeah, your best bet is to take it before, so it would be March of next year when that would happen. So the course is not geared towards the PTE exam, the Canadian PTE exam. However, everyone that I've talked to, again, I do have limited experience with the Canadian exam. Everyone I've talked to regarding the Canadian exam finds that if you are prepared well for the US exam, you are amply prepared for the Canadian exam. I just got 72%. I figured out what I know is question answer, but always click wrong answer, then after finish section realize it's wrong. What can I do to improve? Don't click the wrong answer. Spend time reading the question and make sure you're answering what the question is asking. If the question doesn't say any, like the one we answered all together, if it doesn't say anything about weakness of dorsiflexors, don't assume that there's weakness of dorsiflexors. You just know that there's, take what it gives you and answer the question. And that's, again, something that really hinders people the most is that. All right, I've done the exam twice, both times scored 56. I'm not able to differentiate my weaknesses. Any suggestions, please? Go through, all I can tell you is that I've had, like this last time around, I had a couple of students just exactly in that situation. They were scoring about 56, 60% multiple times, and that, again, very discouraging, but that's something where my course can really help you understand what your weaknesses are, really push you through it, and then you have access, we can talk via phone or Skype or email just about everything that you need to study. Let's see, your study program is 6 weeks. To take the exam in October is 12 weeks, so I think we can start studying according to review week study. Yeah, you can go ahead and start, absolutely. Again, the reason I do things, I time them the way I do, is so that you go through all of the material with only a short break between when you finish the class and when the NPTE is actually there. Okay, I just bought the bundle. How are you going to send it to my email? So I use a distributor called Gumroad. You have to make sure that you enter your email address in correctly, and then you get a download link from a distributor called Gumroad, which is just a payment processor. If you're still having troubles with it, please email me. I want to let you know that I'm here to help. I'm absolutely here to help you get that taken care of. Graduated in 1999, take the NPTE got a 61, I'll take it next week. Next week is my knowledge too obsolete? Probably. I mean, again, I don't want to discourage you, but at the same time, from 1999 until 2014, solid 15 years, the exam and the education has changed dramatically. Let's see. I was wondering which other texts I should refer specifically to for ortho. McGee and Dutton are the best ones for orthopedic physical examination. Let's see, it's done with that one. Okay, we're just flying through questions. Missed details about your course bundle. Can you please guide me on that, sir? So what it is it's the videos from other classes, which goes through primarily practice questions, plus it has the notes, over 200 pages worth of study notes in a different format with lots of tables, a couple of pictures, and then 200 questions. That's something that has been really, really beneficial to a lot of people. And so if you have more questions, you can certainly email me that. Let's see, do not have a study partner. Ladies and gentlemen, start a thread. We already talked about that. Are all these assignments written? You mentioned on your syllabus. Yes, they are. Does the PEAT have different set of questions each time you subscribe? No, I think they only change, they publish it, but they change about once every year, once every 14, 18 months-ish. So you need to double check. If you've already purchased the PEAT recently, it will likely be the same questions. Okay, which one is better to go with, the PT Final Exam Bundle or the Home Study Course? Because you said both are similar, still not clear. It's the same thing. The PT Final Exam has a Home Study Bundle, and that's the Home Study Course. Because Sedvo is still not clear. Okay, let's see. Talk about Pete's. Can you please repeat your email ID? Best way to get a hold of me is admin@ptfinalexam.com, admin@ptfinalexam.com, or via Facebook, or on my website. You can also find a contact link, which will get a hold of me just as easily as those other ones. Would I be giving you notes when you join the course? Not necessarily. I like to make you do everything first, and then I give you the notes. So again, I don't want you to rely heavily on what other people have written. I'd rather have you write it first. That's my preference. So, but if you really need the notes, then absolutely we can give them to you. In 6 weeks, be able to make the course. If you plan on taking the exam in January, you should join my course in December. It'll be the beginning of December. Let's see. Totally forgot to tune in. Is there any chance the recording will be posted? Yes, it's going to be on YouTube. You'll be able to watch the full. Holy cow, we're almost 2 hours into it now. So, yep, you'll definitely be able to watch it all. Pete, question. I just submitted the section on marking. Do you think they still count? Let's see. Scott here. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is we're going to head over to Facebook. For any questions, go over to facebook.com/ptfinalexam, or you can go to, most of you are on the groups of the Doctors of Physical Therapy students or the NPTE of FSBPT Facebook page. Go over there, you can search for PT Final Exam, you'll find my page, and that's where we can continue this discussion about any specific questions. I hope I've answered most of your questions. You guys have been an awesome audience. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being patient with any of the snafus we had. Based on your feedback, maybe in Facebook you can post whether you want to follow up with more, we can talk about more questions. That would be awesome if you want that. If you're interested in doing an internship with me, that's also something you could consider. Again, Facebook's going to be a great part for that. And yeah, if you could please just go over and at least like my page on Facebook. That helps me get the word out so I can help as many people as possible. So again, really awesome work, everybody. I'm so glad to have been able to do this for you, and the recording is going to be available on YouTube. Those of you who are watching this in the future, please feel free to send me questions if you got. Try to, again, head over to the Facebook pages, Google Plus pages. I try to be on all the social media. I'm here for you. So that's my big goal, is that I want to be an awesome resource for you as you prepare for the National Physical Therapy exam. So again, thank you very much. We'll head on over to Facebook for more discussion. It's going to be awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.